Hello, fellow AI enthusiasts. We're doing some more style discovery in Midjourney. I put in some photography-related words to Midjourney's style search, and here are the styles that looked interesting. We've got 5 search results where I took the first 9 results to look at more closely. This method doesn't actually require any prompting, but I did try out one prompt for each of the styles that I then transformed into video with Midjourney's video feature. If you'd like to see all the results, I've got them in a PDF format over on my Patreon or Ko-fi as a bonus to my supporters. You can find the links in the description. So let's take a look at the styles. Anamorphic flare. Bright lights turn into long sideways streaks. These all look like someone handed Midjourney an anamorphic lens and said, "Go wild." You get those classic horizontal light streaks, heavy flares, and strong vignettes that pull your eye into the center, plus a soft, dreamy blur around the edges. The colors lean very cinematic, lots of teal skies, warm golden highlights, and cozy tungsten interiors. So even though the subjects jump between portraits, fields, and still lifes, everything feels like frames from the same hazy indie film. Lo-fi fisheye, Lomo look with a circular vignette. Green cast shadows versus amber highlights, strong flare, halation and grain, low light glow, bowed lines and smeared edges around a relatively sharper center. Dreamy teal-orange film look, cool cyan shadows, warm highlights, strong bloom, halation on light sources, soft focus haze with mild vignetting and edge fall-off, occasional vertical flare streaks, and a center sharper, low contrast rendering. Dreamy prism film look. Warm amber and rose tones against pale teal. Soft diffusion and halation. Rainbow light leaks from glass held to the lens that fracture or smear the edges, while a gently sharper center sits in lifted, grainy contrast. Cold, night blue fisheye look with a circular vignette, fluorescent bloom and light streaks, bowed lines and smeared edges around a slightly sharper center, and a low-contrast teal-orange grade. Warm amber and teal prism film look. Diffused bloom and halation, rainbow light leaks and flare shafts. Mild vignette with gentle grain, and a center sharper image that smears and sparkles towards the edges. Golden hour fisheye Lomo look with a circular vignette. Amber highlights versus deep blue-teal shadows. Strong bloom and sun shaft flare. Slight prism, CA fringes, and a center sharper image that bows and smears toward the edges. Sunny teal-orange film look, pastel cyan skies, warm highlights, lifted blacks, gentle diffusion, occasional glass edge flares, and clean wide-angle rendering with soft, airy contrast. Retro 8mm film vibe, muted teal beige grade with lifted blacks, soft diffusion, halation, and fine grain. Rounded corner projector frames, and low-contrast rendering with slightly softer edges. Moody golden teal cinematic look. Warm tungsten highlights against cool green shadows. Strong diffusion or halation that makes lights bloom. Gentle vignette with lifted blacks, and soft edges in a velvety, low-contrast haze. Catadioptic, a mirror-style lens that uses glass and mirrors. Background lights can look like donuts. These catadioptic styles go full, weird lens mode. Everything feels like it's been shot through a mirror lens and then blasted with surreal color. You get heavy vignettes, warped perspectives and harsh contrast, but the real star is the color mapping. Toxic greens, magenta neon gradients, infrared-style landscapes and CRT blue shadows that make portraits and still lifes look like 80s album covers or experimental music videos. Acidic duotone cross-process look. Neon green cyan overall with magenta shadows. Strong vignette and corner fall-off. High contrast with slight posterization, yielding a bold, graphic feel. Dusty rose sepia fisheye look with a circular vignette. Pastel low-contrast grade, pink highlights, taupe shadows, soft diffusion and slight motion smear, bowed lines, and a center sharper image that falls to blur at the edges. Grungy green-yellow cross-process vibe. Cyan green shadows, sallow highlights, lifted blacks, fluorescent bloom or a halation with mild grain. Occasional fisheye vignetting and barrel warp, and a center sharper image that softens toward the edges. Neon bicolor gel look, saturated green magenta cross-lighting with deep blacks, hard shadows and haze glow, plus mild fisheye vignetting warp for a bold club-lit vibe. Psychedelic force color/thermal map look, neon magenta, green and cyan with heavy posterization/solarization, crushed blacks, clipped highlights, gritty grain, and a bold screen print vibe. Soft thermal map look, neon pink, orange, yellow on deep indigo, smooth posterized gradients with edge glow and gentle diffusion that turns details into glowing silhouettes. Crunchy overcooked HDR/tone map, electric cyan teal cast, boosted clarity and micro contrast, heavy sharpening with edge halos, lifted shadows, and punchy saturated highlights for a gritty, hyper-detailed look. Retro CRT VHS vibe, cobalt blue/magenta lighting, screen scan lines and chroma noise, deep blacks with harsh contrast and bloom for a lo-fi stage-lit video feel. Cool teal blue nights with warm tungsten accents, heavy bloom and atmospheric haze, lifted blacks and soft diffusion that make practical lights glow with a wet, dreamy sheen. HDR exposure. Mix several bright and dark shots so nothing is too bright or too dark. These look like classic overcooked HDR in a good way. Super punchy contrast, crazy detailed clouds, shiny highlights on glass and skin, and shadows that never really go black. A lot of shots lean into a fisheye or circular vignette, so everything feels wide and slightly distorted, almost like a video game cutscene. It's great for landscapes, skies, and busy tabletops, but on faces, it pushes into that crunchy, stylized, almost surreal HDR portrait look. Vintage sepia fisheye vibe with a circular vignette, warm gold highlights on cool greys, strong bloom halation, swirly edge blur and slight barrel warp with center sharp fall-off. Crunchy HDR Lomo look. Deep cobalt shadows with warm gold highlights, heavy clarity, and micro contrast. Dark vignette, slight barrel warp, and sharpened edges with haloing. Rose-tinted fisheye Lomo vibe with a black circular vignette. Blush pink highlights over muted grey cyan shadows. Strong bloom, flare, and a center sharp image that bows and smears toward the edges. Vibrant teal-orange fisheye Lomo look with a black circular vignette. Center sharp focus that smears and bows at the edges. Punchy saturation. Slight motion streaks and bright halation on lights. Golden hour fisheye Lomo vibe with a black circular vignette. Amber highlights over soft teal shadows. Strong bloom/lens flare and halation. Mild grain, and center-sharp focus that bows and smears toward the edges. Cold night noir fisheye Lomo look with a black circular vignette. Green cyan shadows against warm tungsten highlights. Punchy contrast. Fluorescent bloom halation, and a center-sharp image that bows and smears toward the edges. Graphic novel etching look, mostly monochrome with icy blues and a few warm tans. Heavy local contrast and sharpening, bold edge outlines, and a carved crosshatch texture that makes the frames feel illustrated. Painterly oil pastel filter, cool blue lavender shadows with warm tan orange mids, soft diffusion and slight motion smear. Heavy local contrast, brushstroke texture, and gentle vignette for a moody impressionist feel. Cinematic teal-orange fisheye porthole look with circular vignettes, strong micro-contrast and bloom, center-sharp focus, and extreme barrel warp that smears and curves the edges. Soft focus. A gentle blur that makes everything look dreamy and smooth. This one really leans into the dreamy, soft focus idea. Everything is wrapped in gentle blur, pastel pinks, blues and lilacs, with highlights blooming into big bokeh blobs. Faces and flowers stay just sharp enough to read, but the edges melt away, so it feels more like a memory or a daydream than a crisp photo, which works beautifully for romantic portraits and delicate still lifes. Blush pastel, airy, soft focus look. Pale pinks and warm creams with lifted blacks. Ultra-shallow depth of field and big round bokeh. Low contrast and gentle diffusion for a dreamy haze. Rosy velvet lens vibe. Pink, magenta, peach grade with lifted blacks. Strong diffusion halation and gentle glow. Shallow DOF with swirly edge blur and bokeh rings. Slight motion ghosting, and only a soft center of clarity. High-key golden hour bokeh. Warm champagne lights over pale blues. Ultra-shallow depth of field with big round orbs. Soft diffusion and lifted blacks for an airy, glowing look. Twilight purple-blue bokeh dream. Cobalt shadows with a magenta wash and lemon pops. Heavy diffusion haze. Ultra-shallow depth of field and big soft orbs for a velvety, low-contrast glow. Dusky mauve lavender grade with warm amber accents. Heavy diffusion haze. Ultra-shallow depth of field and oversized creamy bokeh for a soft, low-contrast dream glow throughout. Frosty pastel film look. Cool cyan/steel blue with blush pink accents. Heavy diffusion/soft focus. Lifted blacks. And ultra-shallow DOF with dreamy bokeh and swirly edge blur. Dreamy sunset lavender grade. Violet blue shadows with peachy highlights. Strong diffusion bloom. Ultra-shallow focus and oversized creamy bokeh for a soft, low-contrast glow. High-key blush peach pastel look with warm creams, strong diffusion and foreground haze. Ultra-shallow depth of field and big creamy bokeh. Lifted blacks and low contrast that leave only a soft center of clarity. High-key pastel spring look. Sky blue and soft pinks. Edge to center zoom blur with gentle diffusion. Ultra-shallow depth and big creamy bokeh for an ethereal low-contrast glow. Tilt shift. Tilting, sliding the lens makes a thin strip sharp or straightens leaning buildings. This one really wants to turn the whole world into tiny dioramas. The tilt shift effect is super strong. You get these narrow bands of sharp focus with everything else falling off into creamy blur. So landscapes, canyons and villages look like model train scenery or tabletop wargame boards. It also does that quirky thing where faces and still lifes blend into miniature environments, so you end up with portraits that feel half human, half tiny eco-terrarium, all with very polished, almost toy-like rendering. High-key tilt shift or miniature aesthetic. Clean whites with lime emerald accents, razor-thin focus band, strong radial or zoom blur and swirl, and crisp micro-detail that reads like a diorama. Vintage, cross-processed look with warm amber and mossy green tones. Heavy vignette and glow, fine grain, and a razor-thin focus band that falls into creamy edge blur. Beaded micro-mosaic look in cool navy teal with moss greens and warm sand, using ultra-shallow macro focus and glittery speculars, so every surface reads like crystalline tiles with handcrafted texture. Pastel mint sage miniature diorama look with velvety soft focus, matte low-contrast tones, gentle haze, and a narrow center-sharp plane that melts into creamy tilt-shift blur. Playful sunlit diorama vibe, warm amber orange grade with cool teal shadows, crisp speculars, ultra-shallow DOF/tilt-shift, and occasional fisheye vignetting that keep the center sharp while edges blur warp into a toy-scale feel. Minimalist miniature/tilt shift look. Matte neutrals, grey cream taupe with bold red accents, soft daylight, ultra-shallow focus, and creamy edge blur, felt-like textures, and tidy negative space that reads like a staged diorama. Whimsical miniature diorama look. Lush mossy greens with warm tan woods, soft daylight, ultra-shallow tilt-shift focus, clean bokeh, and crisp micro-detail that feels hand-built and toy-scale. Papercraft topographic diorama look. Muted sage cream with warm craft browns. Soft daylight, visible paper grain and cut edges. Low poly geometry, and a narrow tilt-shift focus plane that leaves crisp center detail fading to creamy blur. Autumnal miniature diorama look. Rich copper/crimson/orange tones with soft magenta highlights. Ultra-shallow tilt-shift depth and creamy bokeh. Warm backlight and gentle bloom that make crisp micro-details pop against velvety blur. What I really like about this little experiment is how far you can get with just a word in the style search. You type in something super technical like anamorphic flare or Catadioptic, and Midjourney doesn't just give you random shots. It builds these really consistent little visual worlds. Hazy indie film flares, crunchy HDR skies, dreamy soft focus bokeh, neon mirror lens weirdness, or whole landscapes that suddenly look like tiny toy dioramas. Seeing the grids side by side makes it pretty clear that each term has its own lens personality, and that personality sticks even when you switch from portraits to landscapes to still lifes. So if you like a certain vibe, maybe the pastel soft focus look, or the punchy HDR fisheye chaos, you can pretty confidently drop that style onto your own prompts and know roughly what kind of rendering you'll get back. If you end up using any of these styles in your own work, let me know in the comments which one became your go-to lens vibe. Thanks for watching. Thanks for hanging out with me. And as always, let's continue prompting.